Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Leela Shamash and I am so happy that spring is here. So I wanted to make this video to celebrate and read some pink books for spring. I love pink books and I have an undergrad in women's studies and a master's in creative writing. So I know that when a book is pink, I have to buy it. Let's get into the TBR for this video. So first we have How to Fuck Like a Girl by Vera Blossom. This is one of the first publications out from Michelle T's new publishing project, Dopamine Press, and I'm really excited about it. It's personal essays, and I think it's gonna be a really fun time. Next we have Stag Dance by Torrey Peters. I am so excited about this book. I went to the Strand launch. It was an amazing event. It was so inspiring. Torrey Peters was so generous and kind in the signing line. There's my little signature. I told her that I really resonated with a part in Detransition Baby where the character is expressing that she doesn't really want to be part of a scene. She's like longing to be a basic mom in the suburbs. And because I said that I liked that, Torrey Peters recommended a book to me, and she was so sweet as to like spell out the author's name. It's Disappoint Me by Nicola Dinan. It's coming out later this year and I am so excited about it. I'm gonna put in my pre-order at Hive Mind. It was such an amazing experience. So this is a collection of previously self-published works and her new novella, Stag Dance. Next, we have We Could Be Rats by Emily Austen. And I'd been seeing this on the tables at bookstores and I was like, like it's pink, it's lesbian, I want it. So I eventually got it. This is gonna be my first time reading Emily Austen. I was kind of influenced to pick this up by Kate Menig and Leisha Haley, who read it for their podcast book club. I'm excited about it. I think it's gonna be fun. And finally, we have The Fifth Wound by Aurora Mattia. I am really excited about this book. I actually got my copy signed at Topos 2 recently. She did a reading and it was so packed, like we were all like standing like so close together. It was amazing. And some friends of mine who have read my novella manuscript have noted a sort of similarity in our styles. I have started this book. It's very dreamy and also very confronting. So I'm looking forward to finishing this. So that is the TBR. I think I'm gonna start with Stag Dance. Also, this book is kind of like fuchsia, which is very in right now. And normally I'm extremely loyal to light pink and I do not resonate with darker pinks at all. But because this color is so in this season and I've been seeing it everywhere, it's gotten to a point where I've actually been brainwashed into liking it. So now I'm like, yes, this color is the best vibe ever. It makes me so happy to hold it and read it. Okay, marketing. I've started reading Infect Your Friends and Loved Ones, and at the Strand, she was saying that she wrote that novella with a very punk attitude and that she was really motivated to inspire other trans women that like, you don't have to be perfect, you can just write and put your work out there. And I love that. And Gretchen Felker Martin, who wrote Manhunt, has said that she was really inspired by Torrey Peters, and I feel like I really sense the inspiration of Infect Your Friends and Loved Ones in Manhunt. So I love that. This book is actually also signed. And then of course, Detransition Baby was extremely successful and now her previously self-published novellas are included in this traditionally published collection. I feel like it's really a celebration of her success. And she was talking about following the publication of Detransition Baby. She found that she was able to find freedom in writing again by deciding to write what she thought no one wanted and write a story about lumberjacks, the lumberjack genre. So I'm very interested to read that. And my critical question going in will be whether and how a story about loggers in Vermont exploring gender will engage with the topic of colonialism. So I'm really excited to get into this and I'll get back to you with my next update. Hey guys. I am here with Selenite. It is a beautiful day and we're going for a walk in the park. Got my book in my pocket. We're at the waterfall and Selenite is super committed to being under this rock. Okay, hello. We are back from our walk. I got Selenite out from under the rock. As you saw, I made some progress in How to Fuck Like a Girl. And wow, Vera Rose can really write a sentence. Like, always the foreplay, never the aftercare. It's like these people have never thought about the narrative structure of a good story. Also, I noticed that this physical book like perfectly matches So Sad Today by Melissa Broder. They're like the same exact height and width and color palette, and I'm obsessed with that because they're also both books of personal essays and explore similar themes of like sex and fantasy, etc. So I love that. I'm obsessed with that. This morning I did finish Infect Your Friends and Loved Ones, and then I started The Masker, which although it comes last in the book is I think the next chronologically. And I had known that these stories were out, and I knew that Torrey Peters had self-published these stories, Infect Your Friends and Loved Ones and The Masker, but I didn't understand that they were from before Detransition Baby. They were written in 2016. I just assumed that because of the titles, they were COVID stories, and I just hadn't read them yet because I didn't feel a sense of desire to read about the pandemic while I was still in and recovering from the experience of being in the pandemic. But that was just a misconception, a wrong assumption. They were written in 2016. So I loved reading Infect Your Friends and Loved Ones and seeing the growth in Torrey Peters' writing since 2016 and Detransition Baby. And I started The Masker, and the topic of American studies and the theme of the railroad plus the logging that I know is going to come in the titular stag dance, these what I think of as colonial projects, put me in the mood to read something from a two-spirit perspective. So I got the audiobook of Johnny Appleseed on Libby, and I'll listen to that this week as well. Also, in the acknowledgements, Torrey Peters talks about going to a Topside Press reading and meeting people who helped her self-publish Infect Your Friends and Loved Ones and The Masker, including Casey Plett. And Casey Plett talks about those Topside Press readings in her book on Community, which I love. So that was such a fun experience of seeing how everything is connected. So those are my updates for now. I will probably read more tonight and talk to you again tomorrow. Bye. Hello. So I finished the story The Masker last night, and I found it totally devastating. The story was just so sad for every character. Like, it was tragic for the woman who was betrayed, deeply disappointing in regard to what I read as the protagonist's lack of self-acceptance, and also like really sad for the fetishist who I understand is hurting others because he's repressed. I do have hope for the protagonist to accept herself and live authentically, but it still hurts so much that she betrayed this vulnerable woman who just wanted to support and help her. It's such like real writing. Like, I can really feel that Torrey Peters went to Iowa. And then I read The Chaser this morning. I guess I should explain. The Chaser is about two kids at a boarding school who have a sort of romance. This is happening in the context of like a boys' dormitory. Robbie is the sort of love interest. Robbie is feminine and pretty much explicitly identifies as a girl, and our protagonist is not thinking of themselves as queer. So there's some tension there. So it's perfect for fans of boarding school stories such as Harry Potter. I also found The Pig Farm so upsetting, and this is a relatively very nice farm. Like that moment where the protagonist wonders if working on the farm would make them want to go vegetarian, then hardening against it. Again, I'm just so grateful that I'm vegan. You know, a pig is not an it. As long as there are slaughterhouses, there will always be war. But I feel like that is really relevant to the American context of these stories and the portrayal of the violence of masculinity, like with the father-son steakhouse scene. And it's so beautifully devastating when Robbie says, "You make me compete with you in a way that we both hate." And there's this idea of how it looked. Like, it's not how it looked, but he also was actually bullying Robbie. I'm like so heartbroken for these characters. Also, I love it when stuff matches, and I noticed that this cover beautifully matches Rose Quartz. I was saying that I was craving some decolonization, and this is a beautiful book of poems by Sasha Takshablu-LaPointe, who is an indigenous poet from the Pacific Northwest, and some of Stag Dance is set in and around Seattle. My magical friend Mattia gave this book to me, and I love it so much. I would highly recommend this book. It has witchcraft, fairy tales, healing from sexual violence and grief. It's so beautiful and powerful. Then I went to the garden and read some more H.T. Flagg, and I'm loving the pastel goth and witchcraft representation, and especially this idea that creating our own worlds is a better project than trying to be normal in the cis hetero world. So sort of like an anti-assimilationist ethos. I love be the goth girl in the back of the class who is really good at crocheting. Personally, I like to cultivate a sort of prep at an all-girls Christian school who carries an evil secret and practices witchcraft on the weekend vibe. It's so much more fun and liberating to create new worlds. And actually, in that regard, this book is kind of reminding me of Fierce Femmes and Notorious Liars by Kai Cheng Tom. I love this book so much, and actually it's our Ophelia House book club pick for April, so I'm excited to reread that. And if ever you're interested in joining my book club, that is linked down below. Another beautiful pairing, actually. Herstory. I also really feel the quote, that gap between how I felt in my mind's eye in my fantasy and how I was actually seen was a deep, deep chasm. When the dream world and material world don't align, it's devastating. Yes. And then I just thought this was so perfect. I think about money a lot. I can't help it. I'm an earth sign, but I despise capitalism, the slow commodification of everything into its monetary value, the flattening of people, time, animals, plants, of everything in existence. That's just so perfect to me. Like, yes, maybe it's astrology, maybe it's capitalism. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So those are all my updates for now. I'm planning to start Stag Dance, the titular novel within the collection, tonight. That's all I've got left in the book. They're my current annotations. And I will talk to you again with my next update. Okay, hello, hi. So it is a few days later. I have finished Stag Dance and How to Fuck Like a Girl. I'm also halfway through the Johnny Appleseed audiobook, and I started We Could Be Rats by Emily Austin. Okay, so let's start by talking about Stag Dance. I had some further reflections on the earlier stories. So first, I was thinking more about the masker, and I was reflecting on the fact that the more assimilationist or normative trans woman in the story is an ex-police officer. And I was sort of asking myself, did she become a police officer before she transitioned because she was repressed and trying to be as safe and masculine as possible? Because at the time that the story takes place, she's out as trans and retired from policing, but she is actively policing the presence of the masker in her space. And in my interpretation, she sees his aberrant behavior as a threat to normalcy and the safety that she associates with being as normal or respectable as possible. What is really interesting to me about that in this story, though, is that it really doesn't protect her. And that's the thing about respectability politics or assimilation, is that it will never ever protect you from people who fundamentally do not believe that your existence is valid, even if they accept or include you to an extent. And that plays out here, where as she's being arrested, she tries to gain some control over the situation or respect by telling them that they're doing it wrong. And she says, I'm a cop too. And they don't give a fuck. And they misgender her as they carry her out by force. And I feel like that's really illustrative and heartbreaking. Speaking of heartbreak, the story The Chaser has also really been resonating in my heart, and I feel like I will carry it with me forever. The fact that each of these lovers was wanting and waiting for the other to confess their love publicly, thinking that that would save them, is just so devastating and a true tragedy. Okay, so let's talk about the novel Stag Dance within the collection. As I'd mentioned, I was reading with an interest in the topic of colonialism, and it was certainly acknowledged. Colonialism is present as a theme in this story. I'm honestly not sure at this point if that's done in a critical way, so I continue to feel interested and curious about that, and how, in general, themes of gender and colonialism are connected. So I took some book report style notes about this. Okay, so colonialism in the text. The opening image uses the words government land and green gold, ancient pines. So we're talking about old growth logging, which definitely situates us within like an extractivist colonial point of view. So I of course recommend reading Braiding Sweetgrass, and as we have always done, to complement this story of loggers. And the premise of the story is that it's a logging camp where they're illegally cutting trees on government land. The men on the camp are described as potlatching 3 times, and they keep their supplies in a structure that they refer to as a wigwam 3 times. They reference the Kennedy border. There's a settler's log cabin. They also talk about their relationship to indigenous communities who live in the territories where they're logging or have logged before. Like they talk about some candy timber that's not harvested out of superstition, and that the local Blackfeet people don't even go to that area. They talk about building a road over the Beartooth Mountains, which strikes me as an intensely colonial project. Navajo Turo sheep are mentioned, and there is an indigenous character who's mentioned as being part of the camp called Johnny Duck Chief. There's some engagement with politics of the time. Some of the loggers are part of the Wobblies, which is the Industrial Workers Labor Union, and they refer to red politics, and this is taking place in the 1930s. There's also a reference to the Sikh rail work camps, and one of the members of their camp is also Sikh. I also noticed themes of religion in the text, so I took some notes for Christianity. Obviously, Christianity is very intertwined with colonialism. The protagonist refers to some clouds as cathedral clouds. There's reference to sodomy and a verse in the Bible that refers to garments, like in the context of like men and women wearing like appropriate clothing for their gender role. There are members of the camp who are identified as Mormon and Catholic. I love the protagonist's honesty about their own religiosity. They say, "Most faiths I quietly do not respect and not along with mystical claptrap," but they show basic respect for other people's faiths and are kind of asking that that same basic respect be shown for their gender. I thought that was great. I also took notes about witchcraft in this text because I did notice like a fair bit of witchcraft vocabulary, which felt pertinent to all these themes. There are references to witchy familiars. There are these sort of witchy nature descriptions, like one that I loved, haunted woods and fairy will-o'-the-wisp. There's an emotion described as pure demonic spell-casting energy. Love that. And then I also noticed this theme of heaven and the earth and the duality of like the ideal and real realms, as that parallels Babe, the protagonist's experience of their gender. So there are like references to heaven and earth. And at one point, okay, so the premise of the story is that there's like going to be a dance, and some of the workers on this logging camp are going to go as the women because it's like in theory an all-male work camp, and the ones who are going to play the role of women are going to identify themselves by wearing like a triangle on their outfit. And the protagonist, Babe Bunyan, volunteers to go as a woman and experiences a sort of like unexpected gender euphoria in their experience of wearing the triangle and playing the role of woman in the context of this dance. But the thing is, they're like a very tall and strong, large lumberjack. So there's this sort of like dissonance in their experience where the people around them are reflecting back to them a reality of them as being this like huge masculine lumberjack, but they're experiencing themselves as feminine and struggling with that tension. So at one point, Babe Bunyan and this other character are being lifted up on blankets, and then they're compared to angels in that scene. And the thing is, so there's like a tear in the fabric, and Babe comes crashing back down to earth. And Babe also sort of projects a fantasy onto Lizen, who's the other feminine character at camp. And Babe also talks about experiencing a sort of spirit-body split. That type of vocabulary is repeated. Speaking of vocabulary, language is like a really important part of this story. And Tori Peters was saying that she wrote it having been inspired by a dictionary of lumberjack vocabulary that she'd found. And so Babe Bunyan, the protagonist and narrator, uses this very elaborate, illustrative, sort of silly vocabulary that's really different from like standard English vernacular. So it's really funny where at one point he's talking about the feeling of searching for the exact right word, because often I got the sense that Babe is sort of making up the exact right word that they need at any given point. And at one point Babe is sort of at a loss for words and says, I might as well have never learned a single English word for all that were available to me. And I thought that was interesting because it's like Babe doesn't have the words to express their experience of gender despite having such a lavish vocabulary available to them in general. And then there are some themes and reflections about the creation of gender through language and the declaration of one's gender as a linguistic act. So that was all super interesting to me. I also noted that at one point women are compared to cattle, which I found interesting in terms, again, of like maybe colonial gender dynamics and the relationship between man and nature and animals and women in a colonial logic. I also thought it was interesting that the story raised the concept of a scapegoat. I felt that that kind of spoke to the cultural moment politically in terms of like moral panic over trans people's existence in terms of scapegoating trans people. And then there's this concept of the agropelter, which is a monster from lumberjack folklore who ends up sort of blurring with Babe Bunyan, the protagonist, and getting maybe what Babe wanted in the end. I'll leave it at that. The ending was very, oh my God. I would also just note that there was some horrifying gore in the story on page 219 in this version. A description, not an actual event, but still. Also, Torrey Peters splits her time between Brooklyn and an off-grid cabin in Vermont. And I feel like I could sort of sense the influence of living in the forest in Vermont in the story Stag Dance. So yeah, all very interesting. Okay, next is How to Fuck Like a Girl. I loved this book so much. I feel like Vera Blossom really speaks my language and lives in a version of the world that I also aspire to live in and that I love. Like her vocabulary of magic and radical queer and trans love in late capitalism with an awareness of climate crisis just really resonates with me. I was having like a spiritual experience reading this book. I was really moved by it. I loved it so much. It really transported me to a sparkly pink, divine energy. It's so beautifully written. I just can't recommend it enough. I loved this book. I did also want to mention that if you love this energy, I would also highly recommend that you pick up Reverse Cowgirl by Mackenzie Wark if you haven't already. I feel like these two are part of a similar sort of literary. Wark also talks about her experience as a trans girl and in the sort of rave scene, and both have really hot, fun, sexy, linguistically thrilling stories. Then yeah, like I was saying, I am like halfway through the audiobook of Johnny Appleseed, and I'm finding this to be a very good and very moving book. There's a lot of pain in the story, like from the violence of both colonialism and homophobia. There's also magic. I really love the Cookham character, who sewed a skirt for the protagonist, and really feel the grief for her death. I loved the Plath reference. Looking forward to continue listening. I also started We Could Be Rats, and oh my God, I'm loving this book. I read up to attempt 15, so I'm like that far. And yeah, I'm loving this book so much. At first, I hadn't realized that it was about suicide, and when I saw that it starts with like Sigrid's suicide note and it was called Attempt 1, I was like, oh my God. Because I had thought that it was gonna be a sort of warm, sunny, uplifting read. And that's interesting because that's actually addressed in the text that like Sigrid wants her suicide notes to be sunny and uplifting. So I feel like that's sort of an intentional tension. And I am actually feeling very comforted by this story. Like I feel very held as well as very sad. I have been moved to tears once so far when they buy the sister the prom dress that she wanted and they really stretch themselves because they're poor, and it just made me cry. I love the grandma character. And I hadn't realized that Emily Austin is Canadian and lives in Ottawa. And I watched her Safflit interview and I loved her energy so much. I love that she also writes about religious trauma and autism, and that she studied like library science. And then when asked what she was reading, she shouted out A Safe Girl to Love by Casey Plett, which I also love and highly recommend. I love the girlfriend with purple hair and a black cat tattoo. I love the relationship with the sister and the like other gay girl in high school best friend. It's like, it's so beautiful. The more I read, the more I love it. And I'm like so excited to get into Emily Austin's backlist after this. Like, she is totally a new beloved favorite for me. So I'm really happy to pick this up. So those are my updates for now. I kind of want to finish The Fifth Wound today because I'm actually going to an event tonight at Books or Magic for Aurora Mattia's new book, Unsex Me Here. And I realized I've basically been reading this over the course of a year because I remember picking it up from Blue Stockings last year, and I really love this book. And I have a lot of annotations in here of like just how much I love all the magical pink sparkly vocabulary, reality, fantasy, divine trans feminine, also a theme in How to Fuck Like a Girl, the dream world, lilacs, like so much of this is so yes to me. There's my Blue Stockings bookmark. The point that I had stopped for a while was like around 150 pages in, was like following very confronting descriptions of assault and injury and pain and transphobia. And I think it was just like really heavy for me. So I sort of put it down to like sort of pace myself, but I'm looking forward to getting back into it and finishing it. And I think it's also nice to like have certain books that you can like spread out. And this one is such fairy dust. It's kind of like sparkling it over life. So I will finish this up and report back to you.
But I was only prepared to sing about the beauty of things, not the way beauty was streaked with hate, like meat with blood.
Hi, it's the next day. I went to the event last night, and I ended up sitting next to Aurora Mattia's mom, who was so happy and proud of her, which was so sweet. I loved that. She also ended up talking about and reading from The Fifth Wound because it turns out that Unsex Me Here, the new book, is like a mirror of this one, or the two are mirrors of each other. And she said that she made The Fifth Wound intentionally hard to read so that people who weren't meant to receive it would just give up. And that made me feel a lot of respect for the project of the book, and also a sense of determination to want to finish it. So I'm looking forward to finishing it. I'm into book 3 now, and yeah. Okay, hi. So I finished The Fifth Wound and I loved it. I feel very proud of the accomplishment of having finished it, kind of like reading Proust. And actually there are a couple of references to Proust in the story, so that's very apt. I would also say that this story actually reminds me of The Bell Jar. The two books have some elements in common, like bleeding pussy injury from sex and time in a mental hospital. And I feel like also just like the way that the texts relate to society feels similar to me, like not making like feminist declarations, but sharing the experience of a woman and allowing that pain and suffering to be felt in the context of an oppressive culture. So I found that really interesting and moving. If I had to describe this book in one word, I would say pearlescent. And I feel like there are moments within the text where the text describes itself. There is what feels like a sort of protective opacity of the self and a sort of divinity to that. Aurora Mattia writes of an unutterable opacity far too crystal glittering to be printed here in regard to God. And I feel like that really pertains to the style of this text. I also found this extremely pertinent. Minimalism is a luxury that belongs to people who can expect to be understood. There would be no need for rumination for the double helix of dependent clauses which fairy shame irrepressibly encodes into any assertion, if I could assume my subtext were a universal truth. But the species of eyeless, skull-dwelling spirits whose echo-locating astral howls sometimes scramble and restructure my inner monologues, such that every thought, rather than performing a fearful recursion of the last, briefly assumes the flavor of a revelation as bright and unrecoverable as a blue star dissolving in a kaleidoscope's rainbow abyss, are fitful, unpredictable, certainly not universal. So unless I make myself extravagantly explicit, unless I ensure every atom of my vision is as rococo as a Fabergé egg, unless I trap my reader's precarious faith in sentences as labyrinthine as Escher's staircases, such that any attempt to disprove me results inevitably in vertigo. That is, unless I sublimate my confessions into a Gordian equation of symbols, who will believe in my outraged scrap of self? I feel like that describes this book. And then just down the page, she mentions the self-obliterative spirit of Simone Weil oscillating among the octaves of Aqua's Barbie Girl. And I'm like, exactly, that is this book. And Emily Dickinson's arachnid handwriting. I love it. So I definitely recommend this book. It's a serious undertaking and an absolutely worthy poetic pursuit. I did also finish Johnny Appleseed. I really appreciated this book. I was particularly moved by what the author wrote at the end. That is, I write this book with the goal of showing you that Two-Spirit and queer Indigenous folks are not a was. Instead, we are an is and a coming. In Nahiyawowan, there are no masculine or feminine attributes. Instead, we have animations in which we hold all our relations. We are accountable to those kin, be they inanimate or non-human, or be they unabashedly queer, femme, pained, broken. We put our most vulnerable in the center, and for once I do just that. To us folks and Indigenous women are centered here. I hold all our relations accountable to us for once. So I definitely recommend that book as well. And then I'm still reading and really loving We Could Be Rats. I just really connect with Sigrid, the character, and I'm loving this story. This book is like my best friend. Like, I love it so much. I'm 110 pages in, and there was this one part that I was just like, yes, exactly, that I wanted to share with you. Sigrid says, I always wondered why calling cops pigs was disparaging. I'd rather be a pig than a cop. Pigs are adorable. Exactly. And I just love the way that this character engages with politics. Like, I feel like it really makes sense in the context of her life and her story. And I really resonate with the positions that we understand she came to in that context. So yeah, I'm excited to continue reading this book, and I'll check back in with you later. Meow. Hi, I'm back. It's my birthday. I'm still reading We Could Be Rats, and I am loving this book so much. It gives me such a 5-star feeling, and I've lost track of how many times I've cried at this point. Also, can we talk about how perfectly this book matches this seltzer? I realized that, and I was like, oh my god, like, this makes me so happy. I love it when stuff matches. This book also matches my new kitten doll, which my girlfriend gave me. She's a little baby cat, and she's wrapped in her blankie, but we can see if she'll come out for a second. She's all pink and white and purple. She has little hearts in her design. She's fuzzy, and she's the baby of Selenite doll that Allie made me, and is based on my cat Selenite. And her girlfriend, Rosie doll, they're lovers, and they had a baby, and Sally doll is stuffed with lavender, and Rose doll is stuffed with rose petals, and Meow Meow, their baby, is stuffed with lavender and rose petals. I love them so much. And Meow Meow matches We Could Be Rats so perfectly. So I'm up to the section called Sigrid. This is my cute bookmark that I've been using for all the pink books that I've been reading. So I just finished the section called The Truth, and oh my god, that twist was so crazy, and the implication for the relationship between the sisters is just so sweet. In the Satellite interview that I watched, Emily Austen shared that she was an English major, and I love seeing that potentially reflected in the story with the sort of English major books that are referenced, with Hamlet and Sigrid's suicidality sort of mirroring Hamlet's Anna Karenina and its treatment of suicide, and then also The Grapes of Wrath. I was so moved by Margit's relationship with that book. Also, I looked up the pronunciation and it's probably Margit. But yeah, like, I was just so moved by the part where she's struggling with school, and then they're discussing The Grapes of Wrath in class, and they're talking about like the oppression of the working class and class politics, and Margie is like, wait, so are you saying that this book is about violence? And then they say yes, and it's about helping people. And I feel like that is what this book is about. Like, it is about the violence of the oppression of the class structure, and it's also about helping people. Like, that is the light in this book, is the relationships and the love and the support. And that's what I feel like really shines in this book, is that while there are some really difficult topics being addressed and some very bleak circumstances, it is really uplifting and sunny and comforting, and feels like a hug from a friend, because of that heart of the relationships and the love and the support. I'm so moved by this story. I'm loving it so much. It is such a 5-star feeling. I was also so heartbroken when Margaret was saying that she feels like really ancient and that if reincarnation is real, then she thinks she's on her last life, because that feeling, that like old soul feeling for such a young person to be experiencing is like such a classic sign of trauma. I was so moved by the mental health and community support that she ends up receiving, and then like just the depth when she says like, if I worried someone didn't love me, then I would make myself small and silent and inoffensive, basically, because that like explains her sort of people-pleasing behavior that we saw in the first section, and just like the impact that the volatility in their childhood home had on her, where she was afraid that she wasn't loved and she was trying so hard to basically be good and to control things and make things okay and to protect her sister and help her sister. And I'm so moved by that. I love them. I love this book. I love this book so much. I have like a bit under 50 pages left. I'm hoping to finish it up today. I'm actually going to Hive Mind Books right now to see Mackenzie Wark in conversation with Susan Stryker, which I think is going to be amazing. And then we're going to have some friends over to have some cake this evening. I love you, and I will talk to you soon.
Important figure in trans studies, who literally wrote the book, Transgender History, co-edited The Reader, co-founded the Journal, co-founded the Center.
We got the book. That was amazing. That was so thrilling. The event was amazing. The conversation was so thrilling and just made me so much more excited to be alive. And I said that to Susan Stryker when I met her on the signing line. And I also told her that it was my birthday, and she was so cute. She signed it. Leela, happy birthday. I think it's great to be alive in spite of everything, Susan Stryker. And I'm so happy right now. Hi, it is the next day and I have finished We Could Be Rats, and I loved this book so much. I loved it. It's so full of heart. It really moved me. Oh my god, I am so devastated by Greta's trajectory. I really relate to how she was in high school, like the lesbian feminist, and my heart is really broken for her addiction and Sigrid carrying around Narcan in case she found her overdosing. My heart also shattered when Sigrid described losing Joe as practice for losing Greta. That was so devastating. When she says, maybe I lost my doll to train my heart for losing my best friend. Devastating. Oh my god. Also, Joe as being potential Little Women reference. I love that. Also, oh my god, the plot twist about the girl that Sigrid described seeing in the first section was a twist. And I actually love how that really confirms that this is a story about friendship and sisterhood and a lesbian character, but that her lesbianism exists in the context of friendship, that's the real love story, and her love for her sister. I just love that so much. Fuck Kevin Fliner. So infuriating. And also I love the way that this book sort of laid out the characters' really personal reasons for feeling oppressed by this politician who reminds me of a certain other politician, and connects his power to her suicidality, and basically like really shows why it hurts so much for him to be in power, and also explores the complexity of how her family, who she loves and who we really experience in the story, experience the violence of poverty enforced by the ruling class, and how this aggressively conservative politician has a hold on them, and how that hurts Sigrid, and all the complexity there. I really loved it. I also absolutely loved the relationship to the library and library books. First of all, it's so touching that she's connecting with Greta through reading about the topics that Greta was passionate about, and that the library was there for her. And I just love this so much. Greta had referenced books sometimes in our conversations. I got a library card to read them. When the library didn't have copies, I filled out forms requesting that they buy them. I learned about interlibrary loans. Yes. I love that. I love the library so much. I also was really touched when Sigrid expressed feeling like she has a sunny soul, like that she's meant to be happy, but essentially in my interpretation that she feels trapped in her circumstances. Like, that was heartbreaking. And also I feel like, again, just really true to the spirit of this book. Like, it is sunny and warm and happy and comforting in the context of very difficult realities and struggles that this character is going through, and that are a very real part of life. And like, in that way, it really sort of offers a hand to hold, or feels like a hug. And I kept feeling like I want to give this book to teenagers who are struggling. And like, it's not YA, but it's the type of book that a teenager who is struggling already with some of these topics, like suicidality, addiction, poverty, etc., and homophobia, might really like connect with and be saved by. And I know like my teen self feels like seen and held and saved as a result of this story. So just thank you so much, Emily Austen. I love this book. I can't wait to get into Emily Austen's backlist. I really want to get my hands on Gay Girl Prayers, her poetry book. I just loved it so much. There are my annotations. So thank you so much for watching this video of Pink Books for Spring. I hope that you enjoyed. If you read any of these books, please let me know your thoughts on them, or let me know what you're reading this spring. If you made it this far in the video, maybe let me know by commenting with the pink flower emoji, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and I love you.